that time, DC, there were probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 guys riding track bikes. And there was a guy named Eric Bayless. Everybody called him Track Bike Eric. Steve Harival, everybody called him Track Bike Steve. Matt Schroeder Harris, Peter Dauterkuss. I remember Jason Stevens and Eric Roman riding them. And then I bought my friend's bike. It was a Spectrum. Everybody had such nice bikes. And how Matt came by the Spectrum was via Steve. Because Steve Harival, would buy and resell track bikes. And he was from Belgium. And he would go back to Europe and buy frames from the Belgians after being ridden for several years, and they thought that they were worn out and needed to be replaced. Put several in a bike box, bring them back, tell customs that they're gifts for friends and family, and then resell them on the streets of DC. You know, that's how a lot of guys got their really affordable, nice European track bikes.
Yeah, I would have just assumed that people had gotten 70s road bikes with horizontal dropouts, but you're saying that they didn't just ride a fixed gear, they rode a track bike.
Not in my era. Everybody was riding actual track bikes, you know.
Okay, and we discussed this, there's the classic statement, brakes are for flakes. Now, did anybody ride brake or did anybody ride brakeless? What was the evolution to that? And I know that even in Alleycats, they would have a fixed gear category, and they were so many races that they would break it up. They would say there's a brakeless and a brake category. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about how that all came to be.
Well, it was completely brakeless. There were even holes drilled for a brake. Years later, Outback Bicycle made a Messenger Pacific fixed gear with a Kinesis fork, which is basically an aluminum road fork on it that you could put a front brake on. But nobody rode brakes whatsoever. When at that time, I mean, there is no place to even mount a brake. You know.
So it's interesting, like I said, since we're repeating yourself, I know a little bit of this backstory, but only because you told me yesterday. And a lot of people won't know that this bike frame manufacturer, Outback, was out of Rockville.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying that when they created this track bike frame, and I don't know how many they created, but you were saying that you and Eric Roman got the 001 and 002 models?
Yeah, absolutely. Eric was doing really well on an Alleycat, and I just sent him a fax, a handwritten fax saying what my name was and stuff. That I went to all the Alleycats, and I wasn't winning races, but I had a big mouth and I knew everybody. So they gave me 001, and then Eric saw it and was, I guess, out there and got 002. And then Andy Zalin obtained a couple for prizes in Alleycat Messenger Races.
Yeah, that's amazing. Since this is an audio, podcast and I don't have any video of you, maybe I'll see if I can find some history on the Outback bikes, and maybe I can throw a photo or two of some of their bikes or even just their logo. A little aside is dumpster diving, I found an Outback mountain bike frame, and I gifted it to a longtime messenger. His name was Scott. Some people might have called him Scotty, but his name was Scott. And it's funny, I don't know if you ever fix it up and rode it or whatever, but that's my Outback story. And but it's great to hear like these stories. There's more bike history than people know. There was a local road frame company called Alpine out of, north of. I wonder, did they make any track bikes?
Alpine? Oh yeah, absolutely. Alpine was actually out of Proteus on the original Proteus on 18th Street back in the day. All types of a lot of famous builders built the first bike out of what was called a Proteus kit. You could buy your lug set, buy your tube set, from Proteus. Basically, everything, your dropouts, to be able to build your own bike. And Yamaguchi and Keith Bontrager and a bunch of guys, the Proteus kits were the first kits that they bought. Paul Reigart worked there for years. But they made U.S.-made frames and everything else. Yamaguchi worked at Proteus building frames for a period of time.
So try and help me out here. So I'm familiar with the local Proteus bike shops, and you've reminded me now that on 18th Street in Adams Morgan, there used to be a Proteus bike shop, and now was that a national chain, or you're saying that the single Adams Morgan Proteus bicycle shop was the source for this bike building template or jig?
That was my understanding. Now, the person to ask about that for sure would be Paul Reigart. But don't forget, the cycling scene was a lot smaller back then when Proteus was doing all that stuff, in the 70s and 80s. And again, as far as I've ever known, the only two Proteus stores were the one, in College Park, I guess, and then the one on 18th Street, which has been closed since the 90s,
Yeah, off the top of my head, those would be the two that come to mind. I think that at one second I was thinking there was a third one on MacArthur, but then I was realizing that might have been a Metropolis, because I think the location of Proteus in Adams Morgan, and I may be wrong, I think it may be turned into a Metropolis Bikes.
Huh.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a... I wish I'd gone to school for history. In fact, now that we're talking, it seems that, someone could get a PhD in, bike shop history of just Washington, D.C. And I think so far you've got more skill than me, so maybe you should go for that.
Well, I own two Alpine frames. I owned a track bike frame, and I owned a road frame. So I got the chance to talk to Paul about it several times. So
yeah.
And back in the 90s, they were kind of a sought-after frame,
So, you're talking about this frame building. Just maybe off the top of your head, can you, a lot of bike people dream about building their own frame or learning to be a frame builder or becoming a full-time frame builder. And a lot of messengers I remember went out to a spot in Colorado and they took a class and they learned the skill and they built one frame that would be theirs that they then rode. Do you remember that?
I do not, but I have a friend from Boston who did that.
That may have been Yamaguchi. I hate to say it and be completely wrong, but that's popping in my head. And I think it's still an active thing. I think that a young guy, Hawken, who's, a young guy, fast, he's super fast on the fixed gear, and he built a fixed 26er for jumps and tricks.
Well, I'm still totally a steel guy, and I'm real picky about my frame taste and what type of bikes I like. And there are a ton of small steel frame builders now, but it's a tough business, I can imagine. I mean, there's a lot of work going into one of those bikes for the monetary return, even if people think they're quote unquote expensive, So.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about. So there was a small company in Boston called Independent Fabrications, IF.
Yeah, it's not that. It's still around. Chris Rowe, a messenger from Richmond, who moved to D.C. and lived there for years, has worked for Independent Fabrications for years. He doesn't anymore as their painter. He got the North American Hand-Built Bike Show best paint job, I think 2 years in a row, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, Andy Zalen has a beautifully like a candy apple red IF bike.
I don't know if you recall this, but back in the day, Independent Fabrications had this horrible digital fade paint job that they were doing for a couple of years. And I don't know, it kind of gave you a headache to look at. And now they have a much more class, awesome aesthetic. And it was Chris who took them there,
Yeah, they definitely beautiful bikes. And so, just let me jump in. Again, there were a few conversations that I think we skated through, and then we lost because of my rookie error with the card. And some names that were mentioned. One was Eric Roman, and the other one was Pat Riggins.
Hold on. Yeah, he's in there. He just walked in. Yeah, Pat. I'm sorry, Joel. Say that again.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's like, yesterday when we spoke, I think that I may have lost some of these conversations, but we spoke about two riders, and one was Eric Roman, and the other one was Pat Riggins. And, we spoke about Eric Roman, and I spoke about how I knew him through the mountain bike culture, and how he was a bit of an ambassador to the single speed. There was a time when nobody, like the single speed, it wasn't even a niche part of the sport, and its time may have come and gone. But at that time, I think that Eric was sponsored by IF. He might have had a pink single speed, and he was crushing it. And he was you again, like I can remember, like not only did I see him at podiums at races, but if I were at Gambrel and I was riding my geared bike, he would pass me on a rigid single speed. And I think that people came to have a better understanding of the human capabilities, and not that everyone became Eric Roman, because Eric Roman would be faster on a geared bike or a single speed, but even I myself learned to ride and love the single speed for its simplicity. I raced single speed for years, and so, but he was like the spokesperson. I mean, it's sort of like a ski or snowboard thing. People rolled their eyes at it, and he was like, no, look. And but Eric Roman, we'll try and have him on. But just to close off the IF is that you spoke with a painter who passed through DC and then went to Boston and worked for IF in Boston. But IF maintained.
He lived in DC for years. He lived there for years, and then moved to Boston.
Yeah, and so IF maintained a relationship. Like City Bikes had a relationship with IF, and so I rode for DCMTB, and the bikes were out of my price range, but our jersey had the IF logo on it, and we got a super deal through them. And a few guys did get the bikes, but it was just out of my price range.
Yeah, but they're nice bikes. I want to talk about Eric Roman for a second. I'm of the opinion that, well, first of all, Eric Roman was always a beast in the Alleycat Races. Like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, intimidating people, riding a track bike like maybe perhaps going to win it overall against, guys with gears. At the famous French-made race where Timbuktu made the poster of him, wearing the French-made dress with ponytails going up the side. He's holding a black label with a sneer.
Yes.
Okay, so he stuffed his he had two Schwinn Paramounts, one a road bike and one a fixed gear. And me and a bunch of mutual friends from Richmond, Chris Rowe being one of them, were riding our fixed gears around downtown DC, obtaining our costumes and, drinking and doing stuff. And Eric stuffed his track bike into a wheel well at Bennett's Forks. So he wasn't able to ride it, so he rode his geared bike and won that race. he was interested in, and then I hope you get on my podcast so he can confirm or deny this, interested in road racing. But then I remember sitting at 1805 Kilbourne House, and he came over after, hanging out with those guys and doing some races and being like, I hate road races. They're the most pretentious lot, And then, so we got into mountain biking. And Eric's a good all-around mountain bike racer. As far as single-speed stuff goes, he was lapping people and stuff. If I'm not wrong, he even raced a race naked with the Maryland flag tied around him like a cape. He would just, before races and stuff, and still win. It was just crazy. He was just doing anything he could at one point to challenge himself, not to just totally laugh everybody.
Yeah, so I don't know his history, but I do know, peripherally. So he hosted, it was like the East Coast Single Speed Championship of the Universe. And it was a single speed race at State College that was, filled up immediately. You mentioned Keith Bontrager. I think that Keith Bontrager, using a rear derailleur, created a dual suspension single speed, which for the area, Rothrock State Forest, which I've only ridden once or twice at, it can be very technical. But I don't know where he did his course, but I think it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so he continued to be involved, and then as we spoke, he's now a professor, and he's a photography professor, and he's an amazing photographer. But just as he was amazing with the bicycle as a mechanic, as a rider, he's now amazing as a photographer. I see photos or videos of him fishing, catch and release of these beautiful rainbow trout. He goes out, pheasant hunting, and of course he's
always been a hobby motivated guy, and he's really competitive. He's always been really competitive.
Yeah, I think if he's going to do it, he's gonna effing do it, and I think he's doing it. I don't think he rides so much, but we say that, and if I went riding with him, I'd be like, hey, wait up, so
probably,
yeah. But yeah, Eric Roman will definitely be a person who I would like to have on the podcast. But so in your fixed gear crew, like did you guys ever do, I guess every day you guys just mashed through traffic, or other than Alleycats, were there get-together rides, or?
Yeah, Andy Zalem put together, it was a silly Alleycat name. It was like the unofficial, official world's fixed gear cycle messenger race, or something like that. East Coast Worlds. It was just a big mashup, and that was a huge fixed gear race in DC. Other than in Boston, probably 90% of the messengers were in fixed gears. It was just more conducive to the weather and the roads and all that stuff up there compared to DC. Small gears too. So.
Yeah, I think that in the conversation you had mentioned, or maybe it was actually in a conversation not even on tape, you had been talking about how you had consulted Sheldon Brown for a repair you were doing on a high wheel bike. And Sheldon Brown, when he spoke of the fixed gear, he spoke of it in a lot of the ways, and he wasn't doing the speeds that messengers do, but he spoke about how he believed that for inclement weather, the fixed gear was superior.
Oh yeah, he enjoyed fixed gear bikes, and he made several monster fixed gear bikes. One of his favorite bikes was a Raleigh, early '70s Raleigh 20-inch folding bike, which I bought for the mother of my children, and she still has it. It's in great shape. He hitchhiked her across the country at that time before he settled down and became a mechanic. Excuse me. He owned several of them, and actually hooked a couple of his fixed gears, and they made magazine articles back in the day, bicycle-oriented magazine articles. He was an interesting guy.
Oh, without a doubt. When I first started, like I said, I rode mountain bikes for years, and the mountain bike was a standard 26-inch wheel, and I had internet conversations with Sheldon Brown as I was building my Surly Karate Monkey as a rider for City Bikes DCMTB. I was building a single speed, and I consulted him on just basic concepts, and gearing or whatever, or even, yes. I mean, I enjoyed having the conversation with, I was asking him questions that he could, whatever. It was fun for me to have a brush with Sheldon Brown,
That is amazing. Because I've only looked up his website. I remember looking it up when he was alive and maintaining it. And he worked at Harris Cyclery, which is now closed. But they're still maintaining his website. They haven't expanded it much because unless I'm wrong, they don't include hydraulics or anything like that because that wasn't what Sheldon Brown concentrated on. But like I mentioned earlier, he tells a story about aligning a frame if you don't have the proper tools with the chair, 2x4, piece of string, and tape measure. And you can confidently align a frame. No problem.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, even though we're talking about fixed gears, let's switch gears on that. But we can keep it in the mechanics thing. So, here's a funny one. Do the fixed gears guys ever ride with any tools? Is there ever a pump, a patch kit, or a 15 millimeter wrench to slide back the rear wheel, tighten the chain? I mean, these guys seem like they're always like rocking it naked, literally.
No, back in the day, you had to carry a toolkit and a pump. That was a sign of a rookie if you got a flat and you weren't able to change it quickly. Ideally, you could change it without calling in to dispatch and letting them know what was up. Let's say you had 2 rushes on you and you got a flat. It'd be best to call them and tell them what was going on. Yeah, you had to, that was just, a sign of a competent messenger. There's no way you could get a flat or, any mechanical that could be fixed carrying, small everyday tools,
So there's a question, you're a messenger, what's in your bag? In the 90s, was the weather such that you could, there was no app to look to see if it was going to rain? Were there times when you knew when you carried a rain jacket, or you said give me a breakdown of radio, pager, wallet, what sort of stuff? Did you bring a peanut butter sandwich or did you eat out? Just give me a quick idea. What's in the bag of you as a messenger?
Okay, as far as my toolkit went, I either had a 15 for when I was riding track bikes. I had a 15 millimeter wrench. And for years, I rode Philwood hubs, so I would have to carry, all the appropriate Allen keys, tighten on your water bottle, your stem, your Philwood hubs, et cetera, et cetera. Patch kit, plenty of patches, spare inner tube, pump, tire levers, and then, other than that, you should be pretty good to go, So.
Yeah, I would say that's the standard,
Yeah. So, yeah, just everything you need, because don't forget you could be stuffing a Xerox box into your bag. I mean, you don't want to be carrying a big, huge thing of tools with you, It's just going to take up even more space. So.
What? Well, so, Andy Zalen has some photos and I have some photos as well of the later years, the 2004-ish to 2024, of messengers with those Xerox boxes just on the handlebars. And, the notion of a rack was so rare. I mean, now, there's the Omnium cargo bike or, the front rack with the, it's a smarter evolution. It's interesting that, that there wasn't that level of efficiency that wasn't part of the culture and of the design.
Yeah, I remember when Scrooge got the very first cargo bike in DC with the roll-off hub. I can only imagine the price at the time, but it was years before it became any type of regular thing. No, but even the thing with carrying one box or even 2 on your handlebars or putting one Xerox box in your bag, putting the other Xerox box upright on the counter, and then wrapping your bag around it, tightening it down as tight as you can go so you can carry two on your back, which I've done frequently, and then because I was on a fixed gear, so I wanted to be able to steer and slow down, but then put the other box on top of my, stem and handlebars.
So, I'm not sure. So, yeah, I mean, I know that you've had some health issues and you've had some back issues. Do you think that your current issues were, you're riding hectically through traffic with Xerox boxes, like one is too many, and then you're using a single strap pack over one shoulder, like do you think that contributed, or were you in accidents? What do you think what led to your current back issue?
Years of injury, several of them when I was my messenger years, and then for years and years afterwards, I worked heavy construction as a pipe fitter, as a tank man, as a commercial painter, as a steel worker, and I'm a small guy, and I've suffered a lot of injuries, and over a period of time, I just made a bunch of discs corrode to nothing, and then pulverized a bunch of vertebrae, just called it spinal stenosis, which is a misalignment of your spinal canal where your spinal cord is. So you're strangling your spine. That's what I've been dealing with, and had so many operations for.
Well, I'm sorry, and I wish you the best. And I think yesterday in talking, you sounded real positive that things are going in the right direction, and that you'll still be able to do your bike camping and your loaded down touring, and yeah. So let's get back to just straight up messenger. So you're brakeless in traffic. Did you ever get into any accidents?
Yes, several. The worst one was when I wasn't even riding my bike. It was one of the rare times that I actually took off work because I hated taking off work, and it wasn't even possible at Kirkland and Ellis. You had to have a replacement, and I just didn't know many people I could call at the last minute and say, "Don't go to work today, cover for me," So you just had to go in. And even when I was working purely on the street, you would lose, for lack of a better way to put it, your tenure, by, calling in other than very, very frequently, And I had earned a high percentage, for working at Quick. I think I was working at 60%. And, I don't want to lose it. Mark was the type of guy that would do that, takes him away. So, anyways, it was a rare day that I'd actually taken off work because several friends from Boston were in town, and we went out the night before and drank very excessively. And we had our bikes, but they wanted to go look at do the, tourist thing in D.C., So we're on Pennsylvania Avenue, and I'm pointing out the FBI building, we're going to walk up to the Capitol. And we start crossing Pennsylvania Avenue, and the light just turned red. A cab was running the light and nailed me. I spun around and went through the passenger side rear window. He had passengers in the back seat. I got all cut up. He tried to take off. Pedestrians in the crosswalk stopped him. I got a whole bunch of business cards and everything. He even told his passengers to get out, Next morning, I got a phone call from an ambulance chasing lawyer. And then when I was going to Barcelona for the Cycle Messenger World Championships, I was waiting for my settlement from the accident. I had about $700 to go, I was like, I can make this last a week, just be frugal. And we got our first offer the day before for $7,000. And our lawyer was like, we're not taking that. We're going to get a lot more. And I was like, oh man, tomorrow's my European vacation. I'm going to take that. my 1 week vacation just came like a couple months vacation. And he was furious, but that's how I got to experience some extended vacation.
And who did you go to Barcelona with? I think you mentioned this, but it may not have made the tape.
Oh, my ex-boss, who had the Kirkland Ellis account, John Cabral, nicknamed Taco, gave me, James Kearns, and Patrick Riggins a ride to LaGuardia Airport. And they ended up catching a plane on Icelandic Airlines, where they serve you free crappy beer called Viking beer, as much as you could possibly drink. So the plane was like practically empty. Up front there was like a gerontological group of old ladies, and then us three all the way in the back pounding these crappy Icelandic beers. Went through Iceland, then on to Madrid. Landed in Madrid. We had more than a week before the Bicycle Messenger World Championship started in Barcelona. So Pat and James wanted to go experience Portugal. So I hooked up with Chris Schmidt, had several adventures in Madrid, and then caught the train from Madrid to Barcelona. And I shared a room with Scrooge, had a bunch of adventures there at the World Championships, which was a blast. And I rode naked in that. None of my friends from Boston showed up, so I was the only person. Made the front page of the metro section of El País, which is like the New York Times
of Barcelona.
Not Barcelona, but the whole Basque region, And it was the day that Princess Di died. I still have that newspaper somewhere. Yeah,
get it fast. Send me a picture. Let's post that up on this podcast. And it's amazing. It's amazing the names that you mentioned. I know some of those people, but it's also the overlapping or just the timeline. It's so intriguing. So Scrooge recently. So Scrooge was. So I'm trying to get a measure of who's been a messenger the longest. And there was a point where it was like neck and neck between Stuttering Mark and Scrooge.
Yeah.
And Scrooge had whatever. I think Scrooge had done some in-office time, which he was still up there, but Scrooge, I would say, like, he's still a legend, but he was holding that crown, but he now has moved off the pedal bike, and he's on like a high-powered scooter, and because he's smart. When you talk about the cargo bike, I think he's just a smart enough guy to know, like, he was in an industry that was over hiring, and he specialized. He got into cargo delivery, I think, because it gave him his own clients. I don't know. I'm postulating from across the street. I saw him on the I don't know if they were bullets or what the early ones were, but yeah. So this is the same man who's like, well, even if I wanted to ride the bicycle, you can't make enough money on the food delivery because it's not like messenger work where you can get the hookup or the multiple. It's a lot of times pick up then drop, wait and then pick up and then drop. It doesn't allow for enough jobs per hour in the same way, so you have to be able to move faster. And he's an adult man, and I don't think anybody could ride a 10-hour day.
Yeah, he's an older guy. He probably doesn't feel like his body has to have suffered some aging and injury, which just happens over the decades.
Even though he's a healthy young for his age man, no one can ride every day for, and it would have to be 10 hours a day with commuting.
Yeah.
And so
I'm sure he still rides his bike all the time. He's just not working on it, you know.
well, I don't know what he's an interesting guy. I would love to interview Scrooge. Whether or not he wants to be interviewed, that's a good question. I actually heard that Scrooge himself had been working on an oral history project. So maybe maybe even just to talk about that. But when I did my photo thing, and I didn't just take photos of messengers, I just took photos of bicyclists wherever I was. I raced mountain bikes and cyclocross, and I took photos of commuters and messengers. But with Scrooge, I just knew I had to ask, and he had initially given me a no, and then he came around to a yes after he saw, like, I'm sharing the photos, I'm respectful, whatever. It was all like out of respect, and hopefully
he can be grumpy, hence his nickname.
Well, so this is the deal. Like, let's just stop talking about him, because he's going to be like, "Why the f are you talking about me on this podcast?" And because but the truth is, so there's just a lot of people have legend status, and you did it for 12 years. That's a length of time, and your personality, like you said, you had a big mouth. It gave you legend status, and I mean, nudity, it just adds to the story. A lot of people, maybe there were guys who, I was under the impression that Jason Stevenson made more money than your average courier.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he did. He worked at Old School RNS back in the day. And Jason's always been an incredibly strong rider. Just a beast. I mean, and he's a big guy, too, And he's always been in great shape, hammering really hard, So, yeah, even to this day, I mean, Jason still rides a bike doing food delivery. I have to assume he makes decent money,
I hope. Yeah. I see him downtown, and yeah, he was also a bike polo, not just a bike polo player, but I think he was a good bike polo player. I'm not familiar with the sport, and I wasn't there to watch it, but yeah, I'm going to try and get Jason.
I think he was one of the first fully professionally sponsored bike polo players, and I know he traveled all over the world doing it, because it was really popular in Europe. So he got to go to Europe. Well, not all over the world, but Canada and Europe a bunch, because it was big, at the time.
Well, those would be interesting questions, and I wouldn't know to ask, because, yeah, I mean, I knew that he played bike polo, but I had no idea, like, to that level, But let's so we're not going to go for 3 hours today, but we're approaching an hour, and we can keep talking, and maybe we can hit 2 hours and leave it at that. So let's review in our heads some things, some either stories you'd like to tell, some history you'd like to tell. I mean, I think it's really interesting, like, that we talked about a history of Washington, D.C. and bike shops and bike companies. It's tangential to the bike messenger thing. It's interesting, So, like, there was a period. So do you know when there was a Chrome store in Washington, D.C., or was that after you? Like, how about bag manufacturers? So during your time, was Lindsay Bedlam Bags still a local bag manufacturer, or?
Back in the day, Zobags and Manhattan Portage Bags, Zobags from California, and Manhattan Portage Bags from New York City are the only quote-unquote real messenger bags that weren't Timbuktus. And there wasn't a whole bunch of bag culture. And if you had one of those bags, it was pretty cool, But then there were several bag companies out of Toronto that were really cool. A couple out of Philly, and then I went out of Canada called PAC, PAC, which was a really interesting bag. Andy had several. What else? John Bailey and Portsmouth, New Hampshire had Bailey Works. He's the one who did the Boston Blackout bags.
Was anybody in DC? So I do know of that woman, Lindsay, and it may have predated you, or I'm not sure, or after you. But so there were no people trying to make the bag thing happen in your era?
Oh, yeah. There was Bill. I can't remember Bill's last name. Shucks. I see his posts all the time, but I'm having a brain fart. Real nice guy. We used to call him Bagman Bill. And then there was this guy, not Pat Riggins. I want to say Patrick Bauman. And he used to be a surfer, moved to DC, had a bunch of really nice bikes, bought a industrial sewing machine, and figured out how to make bags, and made bags in DC for years. Any logo you wanted to stitch on it or anything. And Patrick Brommel, that was his name, Patrick Brommel. And they were really nice bags, you know. He used sailcloth on the inside, and he washed the Cordura before he stitched it on to make the bag so it wouldn't curl in the UV and through use.
That's awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
So Andy Zalen lived in this group house for many years, and they Alleycat parties, Alleycat checkpoints, you know.
Was that the Brown Street house?
No, this was maybe after that. This was a recent ending. It was on 15th Street, but in the basement of this house, he had a wall, and it was bags that he had won at different Alleycats, and a lot of them are custom bags. You know, they would be by bag manufacturers, and then there might be a design or a name on it. And I always in that in that moment when he had those bags, I always felt that was I was shooting stills, and I even thought that could have been a portrait photo essay, you know, because
I think Andy is an historian of messenger bags, which I think is really cool. He probably has more bags than anybody I know, and he probably won 99% of, you know. So.
Yeah, here's a story that is interesting that I remember, you know, I'd see YouTube clips of Andy winning Alleycat Backwards Circles events, and so track guys, maybe 5 or 6 was an impressive number, and maybe Andy could do 30.
Yeah.
You know, but there was this other guy, Ali, and Ali, he played bike polo, and I remember one time I was over by the White House that at this moment in time was closed off to traffic, and over more in front of Treasury, I run into Ali, and he's doing backward circles. And I have my camera, so I take his photo a few times.
Yeah.
And he is in the several hundreds.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Danny K shows up. I take a photo of Danny K, Ali's still doing it, and then I leave, and then I come back, and Ali's like at 1,000. And it's an amazing thing that, you know, like, I mean, it was interesting that he dealt with it in a way like as a mathematical equation, and so because I didn't understand how he couldn't get dizzy.
Yeah.
And
I don't understand either.
So but that was an amazing moment to see, like, something that I didn't know could be done, and it was a DC messenger, and I think he's still a messenger, but a lot of the messengers, like you've mentioned people, you know, you mentioned Pat Riggins, who some people call Swampy, the Swamp Rat, and he still co-owns Real Courier with Matt, New York Matt. And but I think that they're in the car. You know, there aren't the bike jobs that there used to be, and to one man band it. I think, you know, sometimes he might ride his bike down and do part of the day on the bike, or some days, but it's not what it was. And Bruce Barron, you know, still has his clients, but he's in the car most of the time. You know, there was a guy, Danny K, and he migrated from working for people to becoming his own guy, having his own clients.
May rest in peace.
No. That's Baltimore Danny. But Danny Kaye retired from messenger work, and he's now a fireman. But yeah, so yeah, Baltimore Danny. I think he made most of his money selling weed. But no, I mean that in trying to be a clever, fun way. Yeah, Baltimore Danny died of leukemia earlier this year, and yeah, he had some rough moments, but he still came around. He would come to a lot of the Alleycats finishes and hang out, so it was always good to see him. And when PJ threw the Triple Crown, and I raced in the DC leg of the Triple Crown, there was a little bit of a Danny themed. We had to do get a signature from his house, and his partner signed our manifest, and he was on the spoke card. So Danny Kaye, it's a shame. We lost Danny Kaye earlier this year, and then between that moment and now, we lost another member of the DC cycling messenger scene, and that was Alexander Duran, who went.
And we also lost Daniel Hakotobi, also known as Daniel's son. And that picture that you have of Michelle Roberts took of all the naked guys pulling out of the alley at the Cycle Messenger World Championships in DC, 90% of those guys are from Boston, but there's myself and several other guys from DC, and Sean Littell was originally from Boston, was living in DC at the time, and dating Edra. He's in there.
Yeah. So I think they're married. I think they're married. If it's the same Sean, they're married with kids.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's in the stand-up photo where your back's to Michelle taking the shot.
Yes.
Yeah. So they dated then as messengers, and now they're like domesticated and have kids, and they live in Hyattsville, and there's like Sean Brown is over there. Like it's kind of I've been to like a microbrewery and some events where I ran into a bunch of Hyattsville people. It sounds like they've got a cool little, not that they necessarily hang out all the time, but at least whatever, they can see each other if they need to.
Yeah, I'd love to go out there and see those guys.
Well, I think, for some of these people, yeah, and I've tried to get Sean to come out to Alleycats, so we were talking about bag making. In Washington, D.C. now, there's a guy, Brian Clark, and he's one of the remaining messengers. He does messenger work, not food delivery. And so Brian Clark, who's known as Biggs, and it's funny, he's in one of the photos of yours that I posted, but he's super young. So I think there's just barely an overlap between you guys, or at least a crossover. But he has Biggs bags, and he makes he makes a bunch of different styles bags, including a custom messenger style bag that it's pretty cool that he does that. So he's somebody who's going to be on the podcast. I've actually interviewed him. Episode 2, the Rough News Time Trial, I rode the Rough News Time Trial with the camera, the X5, the Insta360 X5 camera, and filmed him. But now I know how to use the camera better. The problem is I'm not so fast that I can just dance around people on a bicycle like he's riding his Omnium cargo bike, but
You're not Lucas Brunel.
Yeah, exactly. Lucas Brunel is a much more fit cyclist than myself, who can... Yeah. And so exactly, like I can hold my own, but like I'm not dominant that I can But
what's funny is Evan Weiss, the guy who does Bike Snob New York City, which I think is hilarious, and I read his newsletter every day. He hates Lucas Brunel, and he totally ripped him apart in this one post, all tongue-in-cheek and good-naturedly, of course, But
I need to check out his current stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think he's like the food critic or the music critic that always complains. That's like, it's easier to complain than say something nice. He just puts everything down. I think that's his shtick. That's why he's the bike snob. So I was asked a few questions about couriers, and these guys I knew who were doing a documentary as adult film students at the Corcoran. And they filmed all these guys, it may have been 2006, 2007. And it turned out like my answer was enough that they used that to essentially narrate their documentary. And
awesome.
and the bike snob lambasted it, but it was hilarious. And but so Bruce,
he called Bruce, what's the Aniston guy, the comedian?
exactly, Fred Armiston.
Fred Armiston, yeah, he called Bruce Fred Armiston. That's hilarious.
Which is a kiss and a slap, because of course Fred is a comic genius, and but yeah, he is a character, and but that is the truth. Bruce is that character. I mean, I would consider Bruce a good friend, and Bruce is like, I'm not even sure if Joel likes me, like, because I'm so grumpy, but yeah, I consider Bruce to be a really good friend, and I find him to be a very interesting person, and I think that, yeah, interesting person with his quirks.
I remember when he first showed up, and he was riding around with a rack, and he always had a small courier bag slung in front, and he wore tie-dyes a lot and everything. And somebody had told me that he had a house in the suburbs and children and everything else, and I was like, I bet that he doesn't hang out long. And like, sometimes he would even ride in flip-flops. And then, over the years, like, he became Bruce the Beast, the guy who hung him there forever,
Yeah. So yeah, he lived, a conventional life, married, and no kids. And his wife, who was a wonderful woman, passed maybe 2 years ago. But Bruce is awesome. So Bruce still races Alleycats. Like I told you, he's more in the car than on the bike. But yeah. So he races Alleycats and hosts Alleycats, and he still does bike polo. But at this moment, he is in Iowa. And no, he's not in Iowa to do RAGBRAI, which just finished like yesterday or the day before. He's in Iowa to get knee surgery. He just had some he just had orthoscopic knee surgery. His knee was a mess, and hopefully, I think that he's thinking that he'll be able to come back stronger. And yeah. Yeah, so that's
I know a lot of people who've had it and came back on top relatively quickly,
Yeah. It's it's not like cutting and moving muscles. It's not connecting bone. It's probably like shaving away some unnecessary blockage of cartilage. It's broken and no longer helping.
Yeah, and whatever's grinding, trim it off with, a grinder.
Exactly. Those guys do it every day. Exactly. It's like their body shop is for humans, not body shop for cars. And yeah, that they're doing a handful of those a day, or hopefully you get a specialist. I don't know who he's going with. I've always recommended to people, I followed this myself, I had an accident or two. I crashed a motorcycle and got hit by a car, and, surgery worthy. And, I was happy that the local hospitals put in your hands the surgeons that were the surgeons for athletes. The doctors at GW were top notch, and, they're the people who are working on, the Capitals or the Nationals, or, so it was good. It was good that I landed in those hands,
You're lucky. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, so where are we at on time? What do you think?
I'm good for a little while longer. If you could think of some more subject matter.
Yeah, there's let's think real quick. So, you started to talk about your first Alleycat experience, and you talked about the renting of a school bus and going up to Canada. So,
yes.
so now, how was that? Was that an open street event? Was that a closed course? Did people team up with locals? Because this was pre-GPS, and the skill of a messenger is really knowing your hometown. How do you race Barcelona? Help me out here as somebody who's never done an out-of-town Alleycat.
Well, my first Alleycat was the Pirate Cycling Outrage, put on by Steve Harival, tracked by Steve and Eric Bayless. At a club downtown in the Hole somewhere, which was great. But my first Cycle Messenger World Championship was in Toronto, and we all rented a school bus, That's the first time I met the guys from Richmond. They came up from Richmond to get on the school bus, saw a flyer or one of Andy Zalon's fanzines or something. And then we rented a U-Haul. And Richie and Beaver were driving it up there. And evidently in bad weather, they went into a ditch and rolled it and turned all the bikes into like a sculptor. So when they didn't show up for a day or two after we did, and we were sweating bullets. It's like this is the days before cell phones and stuff. So they eventually showed up. We got the bad news. Everybody was like, "Oh, Harley mastered, trued a whole bunch of people's wheels, including mine, because he was really good at it." I took my frame to the local bike shop. It was steel. I had it realigned. No problem. My bike was, good to go. And it was a close course race. The messenger scene in Toronto at the time was huge, just massive. So
was it one day of racing? Did they have track skid, bunny hop? I mean, it's early in the Alleycat concept. Was it a manifest? Was it a point to point?
I think it was a manifest, and then a lot of it was timed. Eliminations on the course. They didn't have any track bikes specific categories, but I remember Eric Bayless and Steve Haribo riding really well and on track bikes and placing really high. I think mostly it was European and a few Canadian guys who got the top 10. Back in the day, it was always the European guys like crazy. But yeah, it was a blast. I mean, don't forget, Toronto has really rough weather in the wintertime. And those messengers up there have to ride through a winter that's, really hard. And, they still had a monstrous messenger scene. Toronto, even in the 90s, was very bicycle-centric,
Well, it's funny because, we had talked about bike polo, and I don't really know much about bike polo, but I have known some Minneapolis, St. Paul guys that are bike polo players. And the bike scene, just like you're saying, Toronto is this, like, it's a winter climate. And then here we have, within the United States, you got, like, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and that's like global warming hasn't hit these places in the same way. It's still, they have actual winters, and those cyclists ride strong.
Yeah.
Boston, same story, but Boston, the climate of 2025 in Boston, just like with Washington D.C., is not the same climate as it was in 1990. There was an actual, if you worked as a messenger in the 80s or the 90s in DC, there was a good chance that you had ice on the road for weeks. Snow could snow several times, or Gigi spoke about wintry mix, and it probably wasn't on the radar before, but when you're on the bike, you've got your wheels have built, like a buildup of snow on them.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was a bike messenger in the 90s in DC, is when a blizzard hit and everything was shut down for 3 days. Cars stuck in the middle of the street and everything else,
And I bet you some people, like if somebody did the mail pickup, I saw photos of some people. There was this one guy, I think he was from Scotland, and the guy coach Mike Pierce, and Kevin Dillard had taken the photos, and it was one of those types of days, like the snow's, every federal building is closed, everything's shut down, but yeah, I always thought that it would be fun, and it would have to happen, like, you always have to have buy-in, and you were in a time when there were more messengers, and we spoke, and you didn't understand why they let non-messengers do messenger races, but there just aren't enough people. It keeps it competitive. It's more people. It's more fun. So, there are no real messengers anymore except for 6 people. But But back in that day, I always thought it would have been cool to have you already know when it snows, we're gonna do a race, and you do some sort of race, and maybe it involves going to warming huts or, places, or whatever, a place where you can find shelter and warm up real quick and then go to the next place. Maybe people have hot cocoa and whiskey at at the checkpoints or whatever.
Well, in Boston, they have races in the wintertime, and it was just absolutely miserable weather, and that was just a race. So,
Bruce hosted an Alleycat. This was, it could have been 10, 15 years ago, I don't know. And like only me and one other person showed up. Chip showed up to support because the start was in Glover Park and that's where Chip lives. But, it was wintry mix and, nobody, people were like, nah, it's not, and yeah, snow is different. Snow and cold are different, but when you have, and I don't really have the best gear, but quarter-sized snowflakes collecting on you and you're just soaked. It's,
No, I get it. But I'd rather ride in a wintry mix below the freezing point than ride when it's 33 degrees and rainy any day.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So, I'd prefer let's just go 30 or 30 degrees and snowing, no question. We know the snow is snow. It's, out west the snow is they don't have the humidity and it's dry, and you can just and you'll get some of those slight snowfalls here where you can just brush it off your clothing. Here it's a lot of times it's coming in wet. It's great for making snowballs.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, but I don't think we've had much of a winter the past several years up here. I wasn't up in Maryland last winter. I was in Florida, but beyond last year, I don't recall much snow.
It's true, and I mean, you can't. We can't zoom in too close. The world has cycles, and and this even the Mid-Atlantic has a altering climate. But yeah, it's significantly warmer, global warming. And again, I'm not trying to be political. Let's just stop. But yeah, it's a different world. It snows less. And I don't. It really shouldn't even be a political conversation. It should be. It's a science. It's a science conversation. But I'm not looking to get into I don't want the only people to comment are people like flat earthers telling me that
Yeah. Hey, about Evan Weiss, Bike Snob New York City, I want to give him a plug. Bike Snob New York City, the daily newsletter, is very snarky, but he also has a running column. I guess it's like an editorial / review thing, an outside magazine. And that's, a lot less snarky and more self-depreciating, talking about the specific genres of bicycles that he likes,
Yeah, no, he's good. I just lost. Maybe it's because I'm not at a computer in an office,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, I'll seek it out, and maybe for the video of this podcast, I'll try and do more gaps where I share the information, I mean, it's just more work. It's just easier for me to just put this up without any real editing,
I understand.
Yeah. But it would be great if I had the time and the energy to like a news program, share all the information. But I'm a one-man band. There is no team on this.
Oh boy, yeah.
But yeah, it's cool that the bike snob is still going, and so I'll find that www and I'll link it in this, and yeah. Maybe if I talk ill about him, it will bring subscribers to my podcast. But no, I mean, I think that the podcast, I said I'd wanted to interview Chris Brown, and he had kind of come back all grumpy about the messenger life and how this or that, and I'd like him to say that, but I was like, that's the story, I mean, the story is however you want to tell the story, but I have photos of Chris Brown, like he's like, you know, like scan and pan. He's going by me. He's riding this Bob Jackson fixed gear with like some pink accents, and he's like turned, looking right at me with a cigarette hanging off his lip. You know, like, I mean, that guy was enjoying the moment. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like this dichotomy. Like he like grumbles about it, but like, I mean, do you know Chris?
No, I don't.
Okay, again, he may have happened after you, but in any case, it's just funny. Like, yeah, looking back, like, you know, I just need to catch him at the right moment. You know, I see him. He comes out to the Rough News Time Trial, so he's still around and about.
I remember when I worked at Kirkland and Ellis, these two lawyers came down and were like, answer us a question. All these messengers we see, what's it like? Is it like, my life sucks, I'm riding a bike in traffic and the weather's horrible? Or is it like, top of the world, this is the best job ever, I'm having, you know, a great time? And I was like, both. It all depends on your attitude and the weather, you know. So. Yeah,
and it's true. Like, you know, the dentist wishes he was a bike messenger when it's 74 and breezy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I hear you.
And yeah, I think it's a cool concept. You know, I think that, you know, I am fascinated by it, even if I'm just I'm a cyclist, you know, messenger. Jason, I had my dabbling with it. I had my friendships with it. You know, I mean, I do delivery stuff now. I don't know, but you know, by someone like Scrooge, I wouldn't qualify as ever being a messenger. I did like college courier type stuff, but it is fascinating, you know. And I think that, you know, to document a work culture, if I wanted to interview coal miners, I don't think it would be important that I would be a coal miner before I interview them.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, I agree too. It's hard for me a lot of times to describe to people what it was like being a messenger, mostly in DC in the 90s, because the culture's gone, you know. And I don't know. I was young and it was a real special time in my life. Like I said earlier in the podcast, this is the days of my life, you know.
Well, it's, yeah, I talked to, I mean, it's a lot of things, you know. You know, it's a job for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people, I remember a lot of people would be musicians, or they'd have a different goal. It wasn't to be that. And bands go on tour, and so it was a job that they could leave and they could come back to.
Jay Moglia was a long-term musician, you know, man of many talents besides bicycle racing and couriering.
Yeah, but know. Yeah, and I don't know the only Jay Moglia I knew, that job was a job, and you know, he was all about the work, whether it be line stand or making deliveries, and his interaction was catch me if you can, you know. If he took a break in a park, he was like at the pounce ready to hop, and yeah, exactly, he had other things to do. But I didn't know who he was as a younger messenger, but he came into it young. But, you know, so Jay Moglia, DC Bike Messenger, you know, he's in my photo books. He was a bicycle racer, and he had like sub-Olympic level achievements, and he was a late life cyclist. He was a golfer before he was a cyclist, but Jay Moglia died just several years ago. But Jay Moglia, he worked hard, and with his money, he bought property in Lost River, West Virginia, that he called the Raw Talent Ranch, and he created a bicycle training facility, and high-level cyclists went there, and he had different packages. He could cook, tune your bikes, and lead your rides, or you could just stay there, you know. And he had all these packages, but that Raw Talent Ranch has now, since his passing, has been taken on with the same energy. And I hear that right now they're working to build some trail there, and I think it's a mountain bike trail, but that may be named after him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
you
so
know how he died was at 65 years of age. Jay was always incredibly physically fit. 65 years of age, leading out a training ride with guys, significantly less than half his age. Was like, come on, keep up. And had a heart attack outside of the cell phone range and died doing what he loved.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And if that happened, that it may not. Life is fragile. My cousin just died in an ATV accident, and it's not for being reckless or foolish, because that's not who he is. It just, the diver is 1 inch from the board,
Yeah.
And Jay Moglia was 1 inch from the board. He was always riding his bike at a fast, high level. He was fit, but things can be genetic. But enough on that. I'm going to stay on Jay Moglia. Did you know Chris Soda?
Briefly. I didn't know Chris Soda well. He was got into the scene towards my ending.
Do you think because you were an old dog, he was too loud for you?
No.
I was just teasing. You know how the puppy is all energetic and annoys the old dog, and when the puppy becomes the old dog, they can't put up with the puppy. It's just, But yeah, Chris Soda was. I
was like that when I was young, so.
So I don't know what made it and what didn't. We talked about Andy Zalen, and Andy Zalen had won the Marcus Cook Award, which is some messenger stuff that I don't really know about. But he had hosted this Destination Dublin series, and I remember the top men in this 7 race series. The messengers were Chris Soda and another racer named Skandar, and but Chris Soda, he was, I think, type 2 diabetes, and he had a crash that no one is really sure what happened after a ride with Jay Moglia and some local pros. It was, Chris was at an athletic peak, and he was trying to take his cycling interest up a notch, and he was, like Russell
Langley.
Yeah, Russ Langley, and the NCVC guys, Zach Brown, Shane, John Whittington, and Chris Schmidt. There have been these moments where these messengers have not gone fixed gear, but went geared road racing, Cat 5, climbing into Cat 1, and that's where Chris Soda was in that moment where he had. I think that he may have, because he's diabetic, maybe he had whatever, he fell and he hit his head, and they had to put him into a medically induced coma, and he wonderfully did come back, but came back as a fraction of himself. But it was great that he was out and he was about. But then he complications, and he then died sometime after. But yeah, so
sad story.
It is a sad, but it is a sad story. But it's also, what's that?
I know he was a young guy.
Yeah, it's also, I bring it up because that's the sad part of the story. But yeah, Chris Soda was, he was an energetic member of the scene, and he was a friend, and he was very much a bike messenger. Yeah. Yeah,
I've seen videos of him. Like getting cut off by a car and throwing their soda and yelling at the guy and stuff.
No, I think that might have been posed, though. That
really?
Yeah. So yeah,
okay.
But but
that's funny. That's funny.
Because I think it was I think whatever. But yeah, I that is what that came to my mind. But that's who he was. In my photo books, I have like a few pages of maybe 20 photos of messengers flipping me off. And Andy Zalen's in one of them. He didn't flip me off every time, but he did that moment. It was a very messenger thing to do, and
that's funny.
And so I probably had like 10 photos of Soda flipping me off.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but Soda was my guy. He was my guy,
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. I felt that way about a lot of guys,
Yeah.
Tommy Kendrick was on Breeder Brothers too. That's another guy.
So I didn't know that name, and that name came up, and Gigi, I guess, had dated him.
Yeah. and he was my good friends. We were roommates for years at Sky Palace on Gerard Street.
So real quick, and I don't know how much more time we're going to have on this, but that's one of the things that, I guess what's funny is like, and I never watched the first season of The Real World, but in the first season of The Real World, they had a group house in San Francisco, and it was a group house and it had bike messengers. And I think that maybe you could real quick, and you could say like, oh, the year that you lived and where you lived and how you maybe migrated from house to house, or even you lived in one house for many years, but there were other party houses, or, and we talked, and I don't even know if it made it yesterday, but we talked about Columbia Heights, and you lived in Columbia Heights, and you said it was a post-crack era, but crack didn't go away. It was still like the murder capital of the world, Clifton Terrace. Like, I wouldn't ride my bike down in front of Clifton Terrace on a dare,
Yeah.
I mean, and so why don't you real quick take it from here and talk about, you lived in a legendary group house called Sky Palace, and it was in Columbia Heights, up 13th Street, where it levels off, and it was a pre-Target Columbia Heights. So go with that.
Yes. All right. The first place I had when I moved to DC was on 14th and N, when it was still very much the prostitute district, Thomas Circle, and that was something else. But my apartment cost $400 a month, and which was great, because back in the early '90s in DC, rent was nothing.
Yeah, and I guess that left money over for prostitutes.
No, but it was a crazy neighborhood, like a few restaurants and stuff. My girlfriend was Italian, but she couldn't go out because the Latino guys in the neighborhood would like harass her really hard, thinking that she was a hooker as well. Like it was just like live. But after that, I met Tommy, and he told me him and Gigi were breaking up, and I moved in with him at Sky Palace. Lived there for years. After that, I moved to an apartment that Skeeter had from Scream at 1828 Swan. Phil Adler lived on the third floor. On the second floor.
Okay, can we pause real quick? I don't see the helicopter overhead. Yesterday it was actually Marine One, but it was only one. When the president moves in Marine One, they fly in tandem or something. But it was So back, you're living in a group house with Skeeter, who is in episode 1 of my podcast. Now, I didn't have the wisdom to go to the Scream show the next day and film that, but I interviewed him for 2 seconds, and then I filmed the Swizz show.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
And he now goes by Enoch.
Oh, okay.
And in the interview, he explains just kind of like, what Enoch. It's interesting. It's a biblical name, and it's a character of the Bible that predates Noah. So he went through, a life change and an awakening, and so now we call him Enoch.
Okay. I'll refer to him as such then.
But see, in this case, it doesn't make any sense, because you lived in a group house with Skeeter, so you don't go.
No, I did not live in a group house. Squint made me aware of this 1-bedroom apartment at 1828 Swan Street that in the basement, English basement, was available, but it wasn't legal to rent. So just pay rent for a period of time, and then stop until the lawyer shows up who owns it and tell them, this place is even legal to rent, and then you could move out or whatever. But it was the rent was reasonable, so I just paid rent for a long time. I eventually did stop when I started planning to move out. But that was an interesting house. Phil Adler lived on the 3rd floor. At different times, there were 2 different messengers on the 2nd floor. Alan Case from Richmond, and then Scott Berkshire, who grew up with Suave, who was a messenger for many years back in the day in D.C.
So just real quick, just to fill in the blank for people. So Washington, D.C., gentrification's an evolution. It started in 1968, or sooner. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a slow evolution. And classically, certain cultures move into neighborhoods. Like it might be hood, and let's say, you know, DuPont Circle became a gay neighborhood because, like, in the late 60s, you know, if you buy a historic house, it's a classic formula that a gay couple buys a house, they fix it up, they live there, and they're not concerned about some of the services that like schools or whatever, because they're not necessarily going to have kids. And so so like gentrification didn't happen starting in 1998. It started happening, whatever. I don't like the term whatever. People have to live places, but this is a 2025 world, a completely different world. And as you spoke about the prostitutes on 14th Street and the crack in Columbia Heights, there were group houses. Mount Pleasant, which is now, real estate wise, it's one of the top, selling neighborhoods in the nation. The houses are sold with bidding wars and go under contract day of showing, and it's escalation clauses. But in that time, these houses were, a lot of them were group houses, and on one block you could have 4, 5, 6 group houses, and a few of these houses could have one or many messengers in it. And and like you said, you found out word of mouth from other messengers about openings in messenger houses. And so like if we pull away from you, that's one of the dynamics of the time and that's why it's such a salad days, like just even the group house concept. It's like a college dorm. I wish society was more communal. I loved that time. Even, it's weird, like people you live with, it's like their family. Sometimes they're not even your friends, but when that time is over, you realize you shared an experience.
Oh, absolutely. I used to hang out a lot, 1805 Kilbourne, which was a messenger group house. My friends from Richmond lived there, but a couple guys from D.C. did as well. One of them named Greg Skinner. He was a bike messenger for a long time in D.C. Became an architect. A lot of old school messengers went on to have fantastic careers after being bike messengers.
Well, I think that it's that is a great story to tell, but I think that there's a lot of tragedy. There's a lot of, in the last, I think that a lot of the guys, a lot of long-termers, might have lived in almost like a shelter type situation.
Yeah.
Rent by the week. DC's an expensive town, and the group houses disappeared, and maybe the business started to make less money. And there's a guy downtown. I've tried to talk to him, and I'm almost positive that he used to be a bike messenger, but he's either, he just too much mumbles, and I don't know if he understands me at all. But I think that there's a bike locked up near him that's his bike, but he doesn't really respond. Maybe he just, but there was a guy they called Big Tony. And one thing about the messenger thing, just like with whether it be Boston or DC, there might be the cool guys doing Alleycats, but there's a lot of guys that it's just their job, and they don't know what the fucking Alleycat is.
Yeah.
It's like, there's an overlap and an intersection, like people will talk about the messenger heyday, like, oh, I hung out at Farragut, or I hung out at DuPont. It's like, well, there were guys that hung out at Franklin, and there's guys that hung out at Archer Alley, or, we all know the Dog Pound, or, it's like there's more pockets. It was a more complicated subculture than just the Hollywood, depiction of the hipster messenger.
Oh, no, that's true. What was the park you mentioned that was on 14th Street?
Was that
between
Franklin?
They used to call it Sherwood Forest back in the day, because I understand they took a lot of trees out of there.
Oh yeah,
in recent years.
It got I'm sure that people are screaming gentrification. It's sad about the tree removal, but it's got a bathroom facility there, and they've got like a like a concierge type situation. The guy makes sure that people come in and keep it clean. So like,
Okay.
Someone's like trying to pee in the bushes, and that guy like, I mean, it's cool. He takes his job serious enough to keep it that those facilities are kept nice. It's now I don't know. I mean, DC is going through some weird stuff. Last week in Logan Circle, that there were 5 people arrested, 1 for marijuana and several for alcohol, and DC had been a very lax city, like maybe for the last 15-20 years of just people just, I mean, yeah, who cares about somebody sipping a glass of wine or having a beer or taking a puff of weed, because there's a guy, there's 7 people over there, doing that like K2 dance.
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't an issue, but last week, and because it's part of the Trump, I don't want to get political, but it's part of the Trump, clean up the city. And I think I'm all for cleaning up the city, but I think that like disrupting community isn't the way to do it. I think that a lot of these, and people talk about white privilege, and in this moment, I think they may be drawing their attention towards brown-skinned people, and that doesn't make it better. In fact, it makes it worse. It should. No, I think they should put up little signs and say, "We know you used to think it was okay for you to do it. Now we say it's not okay. You've been told."
Yeah. No, I get that, and I agree with you. I always thought DC had a large homeless population, but I came down for AZ's 50th anniversary Alleycat, and I was shocked by how many homeless people were up on the streets of DC now. Little tent cities all over the place and everything. I just couldn't believe it, how bad it is now.
It ebbs and it flows, well, it was a crazy time when there were the tent cities of, what was that camp out? I can't believe I'm spacing on it. But
Georgetown under the expressway?
Well, no, it was more, there was like this, they took over like these whole parks and they called it something. And it was quasi-protest, but it was just homeless camps. I donated a lot of stuff to them, books, and I would give like my inflatable mattress with a patch kit,
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, but Occupy DC. So it was a quasi-political, but a lot of people, it was just, if you like, let's say if you were homeless, like, so, and I'm not trying to speak ill of somebody, but there was this one guy who was messenger adjacent for decades, and he's like the mayor of DuPont Circle, Bill Magi.
Oh yeah, I knew Bill quite well.
So Bill, your name is Little John. Now Little John is funny as a nickname because in Robin Hood, Little John is not little. But no. Bill Magi, to go on the tangent of Little John, he was very much a Robin Hood and his merry men type of character.
Yeah.
And
he was a smart guy, and well-read too, and had many different lives before he ended up being homeless for so many years,
Well, but the thing about him being homeless, I think it was part of the hustle. Unfortunately, he wanted out and couldn't get out in the final moments.
He died a few weeks before he was supposed to finally get his house in Belgium.
What a tragedy. And so I knew the mad guy for decades, like,
Yeah.
Heck, leave it. I just keep my dog. Amazon could be dropping something off in the front, and my dog.
He is a mad guy. Larry Parks and Eric Bayless and the guys from there living in Sky Palace. Bill would sleep on the couch all the time, and he wanted to go to the Soccer Messenger World Championships, but didn't have any money to chip in on the bus or towards the rental of the U-Haul. So what they did was give him like $100 and like this beater bike, and told him to see if he could ride there. And Bill was there before we were. He just hitchhiked with a bike, and was there before we were. And like already scouted everything out. And when I was in Boston, I was hanging out, and I can't remember the name of the square in Boston where everyone hung out. But I'm in that square and I'm telling DC stories. I was talking about Bill, and I look up, and there's Bill walking through the square with a real swollen jaw. And I run up to him, and he's talking to me through, like, he's probably had a broken jaw, about how he got arrested. And I escaped from the jail by ripping off the screen and jumping across to a construction site scaffold and scaling down and running away, which was insane,
Yeah, so not only was Bill Magi messenger adjacent, but he was also like ramp skater adjacent. I think he knew where the funnest parties were.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, and like you said, like I was friends from the year, so I mean, I've got to pull out a dictionary when I'm talking to that guy. He's got more 25-cent vocabulary words than you can imagine. And I met his daughters at his memorial. We had a memorial ride for him. And they're wonderful young women. And but I had only known them through talking to him because I'm a father, he's a father. And, whatever, I think that we might have shared some of the tales of woe, of divorce, And, but he was always a dynamic character,
Yeah, he owned a limo service at one point. Met Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, I used to have a Red Hot Chili Peppers shirt that like he was driving. I don't know what the story is, but somehow I think that might be either a Dave Pillow or Wiggy Austin story. And I don't know it, but it's funny because again, we got cut out and I think you talked about, Wiggy Austin.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, and you have to check with Wiggy, but it was there at the Bayou, and there was a skylight on the roof, and they were able to look down on the merch for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So Bill scaled down inside and threw up all the boxes that they were going to sell at the tour, and they, split and got out of there with them and resold them on the street.
Yeah, I did a bicycle tour in Europe, Holland, Belgium, and France, with a little train in there, and I'm wearing one of those Red Hot Chili Pepper t-shirts in like half of the photos.
That's funny.
Because I think Bill, I think he might have felt like he could sing for his dinner, like I'll tap and pump the keg, like I'll pour you a beer, I mean, come on. I mean, I'm sure that, I know that Love Boat Jeff, grilled a pig on a shopping cart in DuPont. I'm sure that, I'm sure Magi has some of those stories too.
Jeff Johnson, yeah, I've known Jeff since the 80s. Yeah, good old Jeff. I think he's in Texas now,
Yeah, I hope he's well. I mean, he grew up fast. I mean, I think, it's, I mean, I just think it's just an interesting culture, the overlap of the messenger with other city folk, and how these people get adopted, Bill Magi sleeping on the couch, inserting himself in these people's lives, going to the messenger world championship as a non-messenger, and it just, I mean, and that's one of the sad things, because it's that's why, the podcast, just like a few months ago, this messenger, and I know that there were more than one people who took the nickname Batman. I think there was a photographer, and then I don't know if the guitar player, but then there was an African American guy.
That was a white guy. I'm actually friends with him on Facebook, but I can't recall his name. Scrooge was the one who sent me a direct message saying that this is his name, sent him a friend request. He would be the guy to remember him. If I'm not mistaken, he was even living in that house that I was talking about earlier when I first met.
You're saying that would have been close to Batman and Noah's story?
Yeah, it was in the 1980s. It's one of the. It was a couple years before I was became a bike messenger myself, but I was exposed to bike messengers, being a runaway kid in D.C. and seeing them all over DuPont Circle in the 80s.
Yeah.
So.
And so so this guy, I think, he passed away, and Chip Landez bought. I made these large books. So I also made these mini theme books, and he bought the books that have people in them, and he's given people these books, and he gave Batman's sister, and I think that they were really touched. And but and that's the thing about oral history is, it would be wonderful to interview as many people and as many times as possible. I think that the folk stories, I mean, Bill Magi should have written a book. I mean, Quentin Tarantino should have sat down with him and gotten, Bill could have painted the room, and Quentin Tarantino could have embellished it a little bit. You mentioned earlier today Steve Squint, and Squint is another, like, these people are, don't judge a book by its cover stories. They're more intelligent than sometimes they give off, and Steve is
evidently an elementary school teacher in Baltimore and has won several awards.
That's fantastic. I love that story. He might be grumpy. I was on like a first or second date, and I went to Zach Chariot Brown's house for New Year's, and then I was with this girl, and it's not that I was trying to close the deal, but I just knew, like, she was like, I mean, almost even like nervous to be she didn't leave the city often, here we are, we go out to Rock Creek Park, to Kensington. She's like, where am I going?
Yeah.
And then, like, for it to be me, who's essentially a stranger to her, and Steve Squint in the car, I just knew that wasn't a comfortable thing for her. So he might be grumpy because I didn't give him a ride back to DC.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. That's funny. I've heard a lot of stories about people not giving Steve a ride back in the day.
So Steve is somebody.
His life is a fascinating story as well.
So
he was a Bad Brains roadie for years and all this other stuff.
Exactly, and so Steve was a bicycle messenger, and so Steve is a wonderful candidate, but how do I get him to tell the story? But yeah, exactly. So his stories, like you're saying, like, here it is, like, what could be more DC than the Bad Brains? Like, he and his friends, touring as roadies. Like, what you talk about an odyssey, Bad Brains, roadie. That sounds like, I don't know if I want to hear those stories,
Yeah.
But
yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, but he enlisted late in life, and I'm not trying to tell his story, but so he, just as he reinvented himself in this moment, he enlisted, he did time, and he suffered a major injury while overseas in Afghanistan. He's blind in one eye, but he reinvented himself. When he came back, he used a GI Bill and he got a degree from. I mean, he's a complicated character. People have nuances, He went to Georgetown.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he went to Georgetown.
But he had these amazing stories of his interaction with the Afghan. I don't know what these men who would hunt with golden eagles, and he had been awarded the claw of a golden eagle. I mean, the stories. I mean, Bad Brains, Cro-Mags. Like he and Harley are old friends. His stories, he could take it in 1,000 directions. Anyone interesting, and he's a great storyteller. And yeah, and he was a bike messenger. And but for him to reinvent himself as a school teacher, that's fantastic. And I think yeah, I've seen photos, and he really seems to be connecting with the kids.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. I would have never guessed as a much younger person. But yeah, but he's always spoke several languages. I wouldn't be surprised. He always had a talent for language. If when he was in Afghanistan, he was able to learn the language.
Well, that's because he's so interested in people.
Yeah.
And you can't interact with the people if you don't know the language. And I mean, he comes from his history. Again, I'm not the one to tell a story, but I think his father was an archaeologist, and so he had like, I mean, and I mean, I think not the perfect upbringing. He grew up in D.C. when you were a teen runaway. I think he in some ways may have raised himself from a certain point.
I think he did too. His mom was a fashion designer back in the 60s and 70s, and this designed clothes for rock stars like the Rolling Stones and stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, it's so weird, the brushes with these things, yeah, exactly. And so he's a dynamic individual, and the messenger culture was filled with dynamic individuals. I think that I'll send a message to Bill Magi's daughter and let him know that Bill got a shout out for being Wild Bill the mad guy, and I mean, I wouldn't mind other people telling other stories of that, and hopefully people feel well about the representation that they get, but some of it, if people misbehaved in our presence, like we had to pay for it then, like what I'm saying, like, oh, we can't tell the story.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I mean, I'm not, whatever. I've spoken openly before, and it burned me. Like I once told a story to my nephews about my sister, and my sisters don't tell my kids stories about me ever again. And I shouldn't say that sentence, but to me, I was like, that's my story. Like,
yeah,
like. I don't want to go into it. I love my sister. She's awesome, and I hate the way that I only spoke about her from that one moment. But her kids were young, and the kids now, they're adults, and they didn't forget the story. So she was right.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, there's things that about myself that neither myself nor my children's mother will mention about me being young and everything else, because a lot of it's not appropriate. I've been in jail, done a lot of drugs, I've been violent at times, I don't want my kids to be exposed to that type of thinking at all, So, a lot of us lived really close to the street back in the day, and things were a little rougher, so.
Yeah, I mean, a bike messenger is a paycheck away from being homeless, and DC, and it was a fortunate time. There were a lot of group houses, but I remember transitioning from house to house. It's it can be hard to find, not necessarily a room, but affordable room and in a house that you gel.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's so yeah, I mean, just the parties. I mean, you were talking like, and again, who knows what got recorded or not, and who knows when we're going to get cut off. But you would talk about when you would go to the Common Share or Asylum, and of course, the people knew your bike, but they'd lock up on you.
Yeah.
And it's almost like kidnapping you. Like I would park a block away because I don't want, but there would be parties like in Mount Pleasant, and it could be like you were saying, a bike sculpture of the bent bikes, but it's just a bike sculpture of locked bikes in front of a house, like comical, like I personally, like, and I ride gears, so you don't want, like gears and brakes, like you don't want that much bike contact when locking your bike.
Yeah, I understand. But I remember that you could just look at the bikes and you knew most of the people. And then you could ask, who has, this making color? And they'd be like, oh, so-and-so, he's over there. Or just yell it out real loud. Hey, who has a red Canada criterion locked on my bike? And somebody'd be like, oh, that's mine, It was hardly ever a problem as far as I recall,
Yeah. Do you know how you get the couriers to leave the party?
No.
Tell them the keg's empty.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. When the beer's over, party's over. It's hard to get rid of them before then.
And then you pull out another one. Yeah, no. I think that, and I did post one or two photos of, they could have been Alleycats or, parties. Like, it's interesting that, so last year, Andy Zalen hosts on 10/9, which is radio talk,
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so he hosts Messenger Appreciation Day, Alleycat. And so last year he's hosting this race, and he runs a really cool format, and it's really tightly run, and it's a after work race, so it's short, and he throws this event, and last year was like, he was just smiling, and he's like, it feels like a Friday in DuPont in the 90s.
Oh, really?
Just
great.
Just the people connecting, the energy of the race. Like in the 90s, it didn't have to be a race to get all those people together or to have that energy or the connection. Yeah, and he's provided the drink and the pizza. Like, I mean, he's funny because he's like this grumbly old man, just like Suave. Suave's like, I once described Suave as being like he seems like he's a bully to the rookies, but he's the first one to take them under his wing. Like, he might razz, I mean, he'll call people rookie for years, but he might razz them, but he's also gonna like help people to become a better messenger, show them the ropes.
He's been out there for so long, years and years and years.
Yeah,
decades,
and still doing it. Or,
yeah.
I mean, we have to find out what's going on with Urban Sums. I'm standing up. I need to squash a lanternfly.
Okay. And I actually need to get going soon, Joel. It's my dinner time, and I'm getting hungry.
Well, that's fantastic. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. And so, I'm just going to do the same thing I did to the last one and throw a bunch of photos on so that people can watch a slideshow. I might try and tag some other information, but this should be up in the next 24 hours.
That'd be great.
So is your GoFundMe still active?
No, it's not active at all. I survive on temporary disability and EBT,
Okay, as long as okay, so I won't share your share the GoFundMe, but it sounds like you're in a good place, and I appreciate the conversation. When you get more mobile, we'll do a interview in person.
That'd be great. I would really appreciate it.
Do you know that the goal is to I haven't done it yet, but so I think I'm down and ready to do it now. I have a wireless mic set so I can ride alongside the person and interview them for part of it. Like, we could go for a ride, and let's say we're in Brunswick or something, we go for a ride, we go down to the canal, and then we stop at one of the lock stations, pump some water, have a drink, and carry the conversation on there.
Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And I really, I thought, like I said, like all those stories about all those people, I think it's DC history. It's these, messenger legends, but also messenger adjacent legends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, DC's an interesting place even today, and I can't help but think it was even more interesting as far as you know, the subcultures that I was involved with back in the day, you know.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think that you, it's a flash. It's a moment that happened and it was gone. And I think that messengers in any area, any era, in any town, it's going to be a moment of their life. And it was 12 years of your life, which is a huge part. But yeah, the friends you made, the experiences you had, you know, the traveling around the world. I mean, it was more than just a job.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was a labor of love, you know.
Well, it was a lifestyle, you know, and you know, and that's why people are courier chic, is because, you know, and yeah, not everyone, you know, not everyone can be a messenger, you know. And so I saw today a post, and we can leave this, you know, I like giving the shout outs when I can, but a messenger service in Harrisonburg, Virginia just folded today, and that's Giddy Up Messenger Service, and one of its founders was this guy Nick Waite, and he was a New York messenger for a while. Just you know, he was a pro mountain biker for Trek, just, you know, just a bicycle fiend. And like I say, like you know, people, you know, wish that they could have. I know other racers who wish that they could have been a messenger, but this person actually went and did it, you know. And then he took that New York thing to his life in Virginia, and you know, they had their messenger thing in Harrisonburg. And yeah, sure, it was probably primarily food delivery, but it's primarily food delivery in Washington D.C. these days.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's about, you know, I know in your era you wouldn't have accepted food delivery, but it morphed and it evolved, and to some people it was about being on the bike and, you know, keeping that bike life going, you know, the mess life. But yeah, you just accept the changes.
Yeah, back in the day, someone asked you to go pick up a sub for them. It was like, I'm a professional. That's not what I do. You know.
Yeah, but sometimes you might have to pick it up.
Pizza.
You got to pick it up for your dispatcher, because then they